Chris, the Tiny House Guy, and today I want to introduce to you my newest project, which is going to be a remote off-grid cabin. If you don't know my background in tiny houses, let me bring you up to date. This is my first tiny house that I've lived in. In fact, I've been living in tiny houses since like 2011. So this is my first one. This was a 66 square foot tiny house. It was 6 feet across, 11 feet long. I lived in this for 2 years while I built my bigger and much more luxurious 250 square foot tiny house. This is the place that I'm currently living in. Very happy here. After I built these, I actually wrote a book. This is my book on Amazon, which you can get if you have any interest in off-grid power. It's kind of a beginner's guide. But what we're here to talk about today is this. This is a piece of property that I own up in northern New Hampshire in a very remote area. And if you look up in here, you can sort of see there's a bit of a view. If I cut these trees out, this old shed was infested with porcupines, and it is now gone. I've taken it down. And what I'm going to do is build a tiny house to replace it. And sort of the criteria for this tiny house, first of all, is I'm going to use only milled lumber. So I bought one of these woodland mills, sawmills. You can sawmill a 26-inch pine log. I happen to have a bunch of those on my property where I'm currently living, and so I'm going to turn those into boards, and I'm going to use those boards to build this new tiny house. I'm going to basically build it locally here at my 250 square foot tiny house location, and it's going to be bolted together, screwed together, and then when it's all done, I'm going to unbolt it and put it on a trailer, individual planks. I'm actually going to strip it down to the individual boards and then put it on a trailer, bring it up to northern New Hampshire, assemble it in a single weekend on site. The foundation for it is going to have to be very simple because the road that goes there is actually a snowmobile trail in the wintertime, but in summertime it's this very narrow dirt road that's barely maintained. So cement trucks aren't coming out there. It's going to have to be a very, very simple foundation, probably made out of bags of concrete. And it's also going to have to be resistant to critters. You saw that other shed, this thing. These holes here and up in the roof and on the other side there's actually bigger holes. Porcupines actually ate through the plywood, and we're living in there. So what we're going to do is today I'm just going to show you the foundation of this new tiny house that I'm designing, and the tool that I'm using to design it is a program called Shaper 3D. It's I'm no affiliation with this company. I've started using this a couple years ago on the iPad. It's a fantastic 3D modeling program, very, very intuitive, very simple to use. I've used Fusion 360 and a couple other 3D modeling programs, and this one is way easier to get started on. I think my first time I used it, I was designing, walls and, house parts in, 20 minutes. A few videos here and there, got some of the finer details, but it's a really, really easy to use program. And so let me show it to you. This is it right here. And you can see over here on the left, I have all these folders with all the house parts in them. The one that we're looking at right now is the footings. So you can if I rotate this up, you see I have footings here. And so one of the things that, one of the challenges that you have when you're building a tiny house, starting with the footings, these are all, nice and uniform, exactly, 12 inches. I don't know how tall they are, but I think they're like 12 inches. Actually, I can tell you right there. Yeah, 12 inches. So the problem is that the land that you're on generally isn't level. And so these are going to be in the ground, and you should attempt to generally cardboard tubes go in the ground, and you pour concrete in them. And it's very, very challenging to get these tubes level sort of in this plane across the top and to be square at the same time. When I say square, I mean, let me just get you this view. If I take my sort of annotation tool here, I can do this. Oops, I don't want to do that. Let me just zoom out a little bit here. So when I say a square, I'm talking about, so you need to have this distance and this distance. This distance needs to be the same as this distance. And so getting these getting these in exactly the right spot is kind of challenging. You got to get these in that spot, and you have to get them, and you got to get them sort of up and down at the same time. It's pretty challenging. So what I'm going to do, this design is going to lend itself to dealing with that problem pretty easily. So I'm going to put these in the ground. I'll get them as level as I possibly can within an inch or two. And even if it was 10 inches, it really wouldn't matter because I'm going to use legs. So these 6x6 legs, Worst case, if this piling was up in there, this footing was up in the air by 6 inches, I would just cut this leg 6 inches shorter. And if this one was down 2 inches, I'd cut it 2 inches longer. And basically, these 6 legs will be trimmed to meet the topography of the land or any of the inaccuracies in installing these footings. The most important part though is really to make sure that we do the cross, that this distance ends up being correct. It's far more important to have squareness in a tiny house than it is to have level. You can always put shims and level something up. It's very difficult if this pole was over here somewhere. It'd be very difficult to make the house square. You just can't do it in some instances. And even a small amount like a quarter of an inch kind of makes a difference as you start building the house. So it's very important that this gets to be square. So those are the legs. So we're going to have footings. These will be in the ground. This is the legs for the house. And then on top of that, I'm going to show you the framing. So there's the framing. And nothing too spectacular here. These are going to be, so these are 6x6 posts. And I'll flip this up for you. So I'm going to basically offset this in 2 inches on either side. So that's going to allow me to put a skirt that's sort of flush with the side. So in this, I'll get my tool. So basically in this area right in here, there's going to be a skirt that will it'll keep some of the critters from getting in. They're probably still going to get in. Mice and things will get underneath whatever you put. But the idea is that I'll put some foam insulation and some kind of a galvalume or something on the front of this and all the sides just to keep things from getting underneath the cabin and living in there. Skunks, it actually is a bigger issue. So that is that. And so each of these you'll see are sort of braced. One of the concerns that I have is because this is if you sort of look at this, this whole face, up here, this is a huge sail. When the house is in here, the wind is going to come in and blow, which is actually going to apply sort of forces up. It's going to want to tilt. It's going to want to tip the house over. Since it's such a big sail. So keeping these things anchored in the ground is important. Keeping this anchored to this so that basically you don't want the house you want to have attachment points that are really secure so your house doesn't tip over. And where it's so small and light, it can't actually happen. So it's a very important thing to do. If I can really get concerned about it, like if I'm in, ledge or something and I can't get good solid footings, I might actually take and put cables, chains or something attached down to, they make ground spikes that you can put in or ground anchors that you can put in. I might consider that, but I think I'll be able to do it with just footings. We'll see. But that's really more of a site issue. I guess today we're just talking about the construction. So these this is a little bit, I don't know if it's unconventional exactly, but it's what I'm doing. These openings right here. So this opening right in here, I'm making this exactly 24 inches. Typically these are 24 inches. The studs are 24 inches on center. I have to fill this up with rigid foam insulation. So I'm making them 2 feet by a little bit less than 8 feet to make it easier to insulate. And since these boards, since I'm going to be cutting them, these are 2 inches by 4 inches. They're full 2x4s. They're not like 2x4s you buy at Home Depot. They're actually 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So these are much stronger than the ones that you would buy at Home Depot. So I'm going to leave my openings 24 inches wide. I'm doing that in many places in this building just to make the insulating easier. All right, so let's get rid of that. And so back here, what is this stupid thing back here? Well, let me show you. I'll turn on the wood stove. So this is the wood stove. It's going to be a wood stove cubby. And the idea here is that, so if the wall is in this area here, you don't want the wood stove. If the wood stove was out here in the middle, it would take up a huge amount of floor space with the clearances. So tucking it back into its own little cubby, it only sticks out about 9 inches. And yes, you have to have a little hearth, but it's not going to suck up quite so much space inside the house. So that's basically a wood stove cubby is this little thing that juts out. We'll turn that off. Let's take a look at the next step on this is what I call critter fencing. And what animals will do if they get under your cabin is they will eat into the foam insulation, which is going to be going in here. And so I will be installing, it's not going to look exactly like this. It's just what I drew. You actually saw when I turned the layer on, it slowed down the system because there's so many little squares that I had to draw. This is basically going to be like chicken fence or, quarter-inch landscape type cloth or whatever. It's metal, basically metal fencing is going in here. That will prevent critters from eating into the insulation and, building nests and things in the insulation of the house. So that's going to go in there. And then we're going to have insulation. So this is the rigid foam insulation. It's going to fill up. Again, these are 2 foot by, I don't know how many inches this is. Let's see if it tells me, 84 inches. It's a little bit less than 8. So it's 8 feet. This is 8 feet by 16 feet. And this is, a foot less. So my disc is almost full. I hate when that happens. Okay, so, and you can see from underneath, there's our critter fencing. And then I will turn on the last thing I'll show you is the subfloor. So this is what the subfloor is going to look like. These will just be 1-inch planks. Since I'm going to be milling these out of my own trees, I'm showing I think 8-inch wide. Is that right? 8 inches wide. But in reality, these are going to be random widths depending upon. I try and get as much wood out of the tree as I possibly can. And it's rough cut. So sometimes you see the edges have a little bit of bark on them, but I put the good face up. So these will all be kind of random lengths across here. And I might put them at a 45-degree angle. That's how they used to build old school houses. These would all be sort of 45-degree. So anyway, that is my that's the base. And I guess what I will do, just so that you can, a little teaser for next time, let me turn on some things. I'll turn on some of these other layers just so you can get a sense of windows, framing, topsill. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Come on. So this is what it's going to look like in the end. In future videos, I'm going to go over in more detail the final product, and I haven't quite finished some of these things yet, so I will show you as I finish it. So that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.